12 people, 12 stories, and in every single case, the trail simply stops. A pair of boys whose clothes were found neatly folded on a rock by the ocean. A child lured away with the promise of a new bicycle. A woman who stepped out for a walk before a Super Bowl party and vanished. Some of these cases had suspects and some had witnesses, and in a few, someone got away with murder. But decades later, none of them have been solved. Tonight, we're looking at 12 cases from across Massachusetts where someone knows the truth and hasn't said a word. Welcome back to the Agatha May Detective Agency. I'm Agatha May, and tonight we're traveling through the Commonwealth along the quiet back roads, inside small-town convenience stores, and in neighborhoods where everyone thought they knew each other to look at 12 cases where people have vanished from roadways, been murdered, or simply stepped outside one day and never came back. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to all of you who financially support the channel. I couldn't do this without you. And for those of you who would like to financially support the channel, there are 2 links in the description below for memberships through Patreon or YouTube. And they both have the same perks, but some people prefer one or the other. Now, much like the Pilgrims, let's begin our episode in Plymouth. On a warm, late summer afternoon in 1957, 13-year-old Robert Rasmussen and his best friend, 15-year-old Gerald Montrio, left their homes in Plymouth, Massachusetts with a simple plan: spend the day swimming in Massachusetts Bay near Plymouth Harbor. When nighttime came and the boys hadn't returned home, Robert's mother, Charlotte, called police to report them missing. That evening, police found Robert and Gerald's clothing neatly folded and placed on a rock near the water, but there was no sign of either boy in the bay. A search began, and by the next day, witnesses started coming forward. A woman said that she had heard a scream for help around 4 p.m. the afternoon that the boys went missing, and others said that they saw the boys getting in and out of a boat that day. And a local man said he saw 2 boys who fit the description of Robert and Gerald hitchhiking around 4:30. 2 days after the boys went missing, searchers found a boat they believed to have been the one that the boys were using. Police called off the search, and while they didn't close the case, they decided that the boys had more than likely drowned. But Robert's sister and Gerald's sister don't believe that the boys drowned. They believe they ran away. Both sisters said that the boys had difficult home lives and had abusive fathers. So the question remains, did 2 best friends make a quiet pact that summer afternoon to leave everything behind and start a new life somewhere else? Or did something go terribly wrong in the waters of Massachusetts Bay, leaving behind only 2 neatly folded piles of clothing and a mystery that has lingered for nearly 70 years? If you have any information about the boys' disappearance, please contact the Plymouth Police Department at 508-830-4218. On March 18, 1974, 12-year-old Michael O'Gorman walked out of his school in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and was never seen again. When Michael failed to make it home that afternoon, concern quickly turned to panic. A search began almost immediately. Bloodhounds were brought in, and they managed to pick up Michael's scent. And the trail led investigators into Dogtown, an abandoned colonial settlement hidden in the woods just a few minutes from Michael's school. A strange and eerie place for a child to disappear. Eyewitness accounts from that day were inconsistent and often contradictory. Some people claim Michael got on the school bus as usual, and others said he had a habit of hitchhiking instead of riding the bus. The most credible sighting came from someone who reported seeing a boy matching Michael's description hitchhiking along the southbound side of what is now the Yankee Division Highway. And after that, the trail went cold. 5 years later, 2 boys were riding their bicycles in the woods in Manchester by the Sea, about 5 miles from where Michael was last seen. One of the boys saw the sun glinting off of something on the hillside, so the boys went to investigate. But what they found was far more disturbing than whatever had caught the sun's reflection. Partially exposed in the ground was a sneaker. Inside it was a skeletonized human foot. For reasons only they could explain, the boys didn't report what they had found right away. Maybe they were somewhere they weren't supposed to be and were afraid of getting in trouble. But after a couple of days, they finally told their parents, who immediately contacted police. Authorities returned to the site and began digging, and buried in the earth was a body that was later identified as Michael. More than half a century later, the case remains unsolved. No arrests have been made and no suspects have ever been publicly named. If you have any information about Michael's case, please contact the Massachusetts State Police at 978-538-6161. On the afternoon of December 15, 1974, 15-year-old Henry Bedard Jr. had finished school for the day and was running errands for his family. As Henry hurried across the street, a local police officer spotted him and waved. Nearby, a crew from the Swampscott Department of Public Works also saw him pass through their yard, cutting across the property toward a nearby ridgetop known as Swampscott View, just above their offices. That path raised a small question. The ridgetop wasn't in the direction of any of the errands that Henry had been sent to do. But it was a well-known hangout spot, a place where teenagers often gathered to meet up with friends. When Henry didn't return home that evening, his parents contacted police. The next day, the worst fears were confirmed. Henry's body was discovered on the ridgetop at Swampscott View, hidden beneath a pile of leaves. He had been brutally beaten to death. Near his body, investigators found the murder weapon, a baseball bat. There were strange markings carved into the end of the bat. Some investigators believed the carving resembled the Roman numeral 6, VI. Others thought it looked more like the letter K, along with several other lines etched into the wood. At the time, detectives believed Henry had likely gone to Swampscott View to meet someone. Their working theory was that whoever killed him may have been someone he knew, possibly even one of his close friends. But despite the clues, the investigation stalled. The case eventually went cold and remained that way for more than 5 decades. Then, in October of 2025, 51 years after Henry's murder, his body was exhumed following new information provided to the district attorney's office. Investigators hoped that advances in forensic technology, along with whatever new tip had come forward, might finally bring answers. So far, there have been no further updates. If you have any information about Henry's murder, please contact the Unresolved Case Unit at 1-855-MA-SOLVE. August 27, 1976 was a hot summer day in Lawrence, Massachusetts. The kind of day when the city pool becomes the center of the neighborhood. For 10-year-old Angelo Puglisi, Higgins Memorial Pool was exactly where he wanted to be. That afternoon, he walked the short distance from home to the pool and jumped into the water. His friend Melanie Perkins met him there, and for a while the two spent the afternoon swimming and talking with the other kids. Around 2 p.m., Melanie decided that she was hungry and headed home with her brother Jeff. And when they left, Angelo stayed behind, sitting at the edge of the pool and chatting with friends. Later that afternoon, around 3:30, Angelo called home, and everything seemed normal. The last confirmed sighting of him came at approximately 5:45 p.m. when a lifeguard saw him at the pool. After that, Angelo was never seen again. When he didn't return home that evening, his mother reported it to the police. But, as happens too often, the police wrote off Angelo as just another runaway. But it didn't take long before investigators began to suspect something far more troubling. A search was initiated that included scent dogs and more than 2,000 volunteers. But there was still no sign of Angelo. A couple of weeks after Angelo disappeared, Wayne W. Chapman was arrested in Waterloo, New York. And when police searched his van, they found CSAM, maps of wooded areas, a camera, a fake police badge, starter pistol, duct tape, and a child's bloody sock and some rope. Shortly after his arrest, Wayne confessed to raping 2 boys in Lawrence, Angelo's hometown. Despite being the lead suspect in Angelo's disappearance, police never found enough evidence to charge Wayne with anything in relation to his case, and the case remains unsolved. If you have any information about Angelo's disappearance, please contact the Lawrence Police Department at 978-794-5900. On May 3, 1977, 13-year-old Deborah Quimby hopped on her bike to ride to her grandfather's campsite near Vinton Pond in Townsend, Massachusetts. For the first part of the trip, Deborah wasn't alone. A friend rode alongside her for a short distance, but after about a half a mile, the friend turned back. Deborah continued on by herself, pedaling toward the campsite. She was last seen riding along Highway 119, heading in that direction. Before leaving, Deborah had left a note for her parents, letting them know where she was headed and that she would call them. But the call never came. Another note had been left for a friend with directions to the campsite, but Deborah never made it there. When it became clear that Deborah had vanished somewhere along that bike ride, police began searching for answers. Over the years, investigators have followed numerous leads and explored different possibilities. Yet, despite decades of effort, no suspects have ever been publicly named, and there has never been any confirmed sign of what happened to 13-year-old Deborah Quimby on that spring afternoon in 1977. If you have any information about her disappearance, please contact the Townsend Police at 978-597-6214. 17-year-old Simone Ridiginger finished her shift at the Rainbow Restaurant in Sherborne, Massachusetts, changed her clothes, and walked out the door. It was the start of Labor Day weekend, and Simone had a plan to hitchhike her way home to Martha's Vineyard. None of her coworkers saw who picked her up or exactly what time she left. All anyone knows for certain is that at some point, Simone climbed into a vehicle and was never seen again. For years, there were few leads and even fewer answers. Then, nearly 9 years later, a local newspaper published a story about Simone's disappearance. After reading it, a man came forward with a startling account. He said that early the morning after Simone vanished, he had been pulled over by a state trooper. And according to the man, there was a young girl sitting in the front seat of the cruiser. The trooper asked if the man could give her a ride to Cape Cod, explaining that the man was already heading in that direction. The witness agreed and told investigators that he'd dropped the girl off on Cape Cod and watched as she walked toward a nearby restaurant. He accurately described the duffel bag and the tennis shoes the girl was carrying. They were items that were known to belong to Simone. If his account was correct, Simone had made it at least that far. But the lead ultimately went nowhere. The man who shared the story has since passed away, and no other witnesses have come forward to confirm what happened next. If you have any information about Simone's disappearance, please contact the FBI at 800-634-4097. Florida, Massachusetts is a tiny town tucked high in the Hoosac Range. It's a quiet place where everyone tends to know everyone else. It's also where 17-year-old Lynn Burdick vanished on the evening of April 17, 1982. Lynn was a high school senior who worked part-time at the Barefoot Peddler Country Store, a small convenience store not far from her family's home. That night, she was working the closing shift alone, and because of that, a little after 8, Lynn's cousin, who owned the store, called to check in on her. And while they were talking, a customer walked into the store, so Lynn told her cousin she'd call her back once she had finished helping the customer. But that call never happened. Growing concerned, the cousin contacted Lynn's mother, and by around 8:30, Lynn's mother was trying to call the store, but no one ever answered. 10 minutes later, a customer walked into the Barefoot Peddler and found the store completely deserted. They contacted Lynn's family, who then called police. When investigators arrived, they found signs that Lynn had been there just moments earlier. An open book sat on the counter next to a half-empty soda can, but Lynn herself was gone. Her jacket and purse were missing, and $187 had been taken from the cash register. Early in the investigation, authorities developed a possible suspect, but the individual was never formally identified or charged. 3 years later, in 1985, Lynn's father received a disturbing letter claiming that Lynn had been abducted and murdered by someone in nearby North Adams, Massachusetts. Police investigated the claim, but they were never able to confirm whether the letter was genuine or simply a cruel hoax. No other leads have come in, and Lynn's family is still waiting for answers. If you have any information about Lynn's disappearance, please contact the Massachusetts State Police at 413-625-6311. On September 13, 1992, 27-year-old Susan Taraskiwicz, known to friends and family as Sue, left her job at Logan Airport to pick up sandwiches for her coworkers. She worked as a ramp crew chief for Northwest Airlines, overseeing ground operations on the tarmac. But she never returned from that food run. And when she failed to show up at her house in Saugus, Massachusetts, concern quickly began to grow. The next morning, a manager arriving for work at Bravo Automotive in Revere, Massachusetts, noticed a strange car in the parking lot. As he approached, he saw something even more disturbing. What appeared to be blood was leaking from the trunk. Police were called immediately, and when officers opened the trunk, they found Sue's body inside. She had been brutally beaten and stabbed multiple times. Investigators believe that Sue had likely been murdered somewhere else before her body was placed in the trunk of her car and abandoned in the parking lot. More than a year after Sue's murder, her parents finally gathered the strength to go through her bedroom. They discovered a journal that shed troubling light on the months leading up to her death. Sue had written about severe sexual harassment she had been experiencing at work. She had reported it to her superiors, but according to her writings, she was told to simply ignore it. Instead of stopping, the harassment escalated. Sue also started receiving threatening phone calls, and the hostility toward her only seemed to grow. Just months earlier, in February of '92, Sue had become a ramp crew chief, but only after fighting for the position. She had initially been passed over when a man in her union illegally bid for the job. Sue filed a grievance, won the case, and secured the promotion, but that victory may have come at a cost. Investigators have long considered the possibility that someone at Northwest Airlines held a grudge against Sue for taking the job she had rightfully earned, but no one has ever been arrested in connection to her murder. If you have any information, please contact the Massachusetts State Police at 617-727-8817. September 28, 1996, started out as a normal Saturday for 6-year-old Jesus de la Cruz in Lynn, Massachusetts. That evening, he and a friend named Bernard were playing in a cul-de-sac near their homes. As the streetlights flickered on, the boys knew that meant it was time to head home. Jesus was frustrated, though. His bike had 2 flat tires, so he couldn't ride it. That's when a stranger appeared. Bernard later described the man as having brown hair and wearing sunglasses and a long coat. With him was a dog, one with mismatched eyes. The man told Jesus he had a mountain bike the boy could have, but in order to get it, Jesus would have to go with him. To a 6-year-old with a broken bike, the offer sounded like a dream. Jesus eagerly followed the man out of the cul-de-sac and was never seen again. Tragically, Jesus wasn't reported missing for 6 hours. His mother, who was known in the neighborhood as a drug dealer, quickly came under police scrutiny, not only because of the delay in reporting him missing, but also because she initially gave investigators conflicting statements. After being thoroughly investigated, however, she was cleared of any involvement in her son's disappearance. Investigators did identify a man who frequently roamed the neighborhood and matched the stranger's description, Robert Levesque. He owned a dog named Peaches, and Peaches had 2 different colored eyes. When shown a lineup, Bernard was able to identify the dog, but couldn't identify Robert Levesque as the man who had taken Jesus. Police later searched Levesque's home and found items that raised serious concerns, including duct tape, handcuffs, and a pair of children's jeans. Despite the disturbing discovery, investigators were never able to link any physical evidence directly to Jesus, and without that connection, no charges were ever filed. Over the years, Jesus's family moved away from the area, but his father has never stopped searching for answers. Every year, on the anniversary of his son's disappearance, he calls the Lynn Police Department, still hoping that someone somewhere might finally come forward with the information needed to solve the case of what happened to his son. If you have any information, please call the FBI at 800-634-4097. On April 15, 2013, 37-year-old LeeAnne Redden visited her mother in Lynn, Massachusetts, and had a new boyfriend on her arm. He was an older man and was from Saugus. He told LeeAnne's family that he was going to marry her and take care of her, but when her family looked at LeeAnne for confirmation, she remained silent. After the visit, the two left together, and the next morning, the boyfriend called LeeAnne's mother and told her that LeeAnne had left him in the middle of the night. A week later, he returned all of LeeAnne's belongings to her family, and that's when alarm bells started ringing. Realizing something was deeply wrong, LeeAnne's family contacted police and reported her missing. That boyfriend died from a drug overdose a few months after LeeAnne disappeared, but the police kept investigating him. In 2023, police searched the home where the boyfriend had been living, but no evidence as to what happened to LeeAnne was found. And in 2024, investigators conducted another search, this time at a property in New Hampshire connected to the case. But officials have not publicly released details about what prompted the search or what, if anything, was discovered. More than a decade after LeeAnne Redden was last seen, her disappearance remains unsolved. If you have any information, please contact the Lynn Police Department at 781-595-2000. In the early morning hours of Sunday, June 24th, 2014, someone climbed the fire escape in an apartment building in Boston. Once there, that person broke through a window, entered the apartment, and shot 38-year-old Walter Cook multiple times. Walter didn't survive. To those who knew him, the crime made little sense. Walter worked as a baggage handler at Logan Airport and was known as a friendly, easygoing person who got along with just about everyone. He was a devoted Boston Celtics fan and someone his friends and coworkers described as genuinely well-liked. Investigators struggled to find anyone who might have had a reason to harm him, let alone break into his apartment and kill him. One possibility raised early in the investigation was mistaken identity. Did the shooter have the wrong apartment? Was someone else the intended target? More than a decade later, Walter Cook's murder remains unsolved, and very little information about the case has ever been publicly released. But if you have any information, please contact the Boston Police Homicide Unit at 617-343-4470. On the afternoon of February 2nd, 2020, 59-year-old Mary Flynn, who went by Abbie, was busy preparing to host friends at her home in Gloucester, Massachusetts, for a Super Bowl party. After completing her preparations, Abbie made a FaceTime call to her son, who was away at college. During their conversation, she mentioned that she planned to take a quick walk and might head toward Farrington Avenue before returning home, and that was the last time that anyone heard from her. Around 6 p.m., the first two guests arrived for the party, but when they got there, Abbie wasn't home. As time passed and no one could reach her, concern quickly turned into alarm. A missing person report was filed and a large search effort began. Nearly 80 personnel from multiple emergency agencies joined the search, combing through areas around Gloucester where Abbie might have gone. The community also rallied to help. Roughly 5,000 missing person posters were distributed across the city as volunteers searched neighborhoods, beaches, and wooded areas. Abbie was an avid nature photographer who loved spending time outdoors, so searchers focused heavily on the trails and coastal areas she frequently visited. But despite days of searching, investigators found no trace of her. No evidence has ever been found to explain how a woman who simply stepped out for a walk could disappear without a trace. If you have any information, please contact the Gloucester Police Department at 978-283-1212. Another 12 lives interrupted, friends and families left without answers. If you'd like to learn more about unsolved cases in other states, there's a link below to the 12 Unsolved series playlist. Thank you so much for joining me. Stay tuned because I'll have more true crime coming soon. Some of the cases we're currently keeping an eye on are the Nancy Guthrie kidnapping, the murder of Ashley Flynn, and the death of Charity Bialis and her 6-year-old twins. And of course, we're still keeping an eye on that wily John Paul Miller and watching and waiting to see when his federal court hearing will begin. Until next time, stay safe and be happy.